This is every Quincy Shrift in Bleach. Let's start with A, which has two known users, Yuha and Uryu Ishida. Yuha A stands for the Almighty, which is arguably the strongest ability in Bleach. In fact, it was so powerful that it took him a full 9 years after reawakening to actually use it. The Almighty grants Yuha the power of omni-precognition, which means that he has the ability to see all foreseeable futures. Essentially, he can pick and choose which future he wants to become reality, thus nullifying almost any counter against him. He uses this power to instantly adapt to moves like Ichibe's Futen Taisatsuyo, which allowed him to kill the Soul Reaper. As for Uryu, his power isn't as strong but still amazingly broken. Uryu's A stands for the antithesis, and it allows him to reverse the circumstances of two people. Essentially, if Uryu was fighting an enemy, anything that happens to Uryu can be switched and transferred onto his opponent, meaning that any attack that leaves Uryu alive poses as a great threat to his enemy. He uses this ability to ensnare Senjumaru in her own Bankai, effectively culling her without taking a scratch of damage. Yugrim Hoshwealth, the right-hand man of the Quincy King, was bestowed the letter of B. His ability, the Balance, is a more advanced version of Uryu's antithesis. First, an enemy must attack Yugrim, gaining good fortune. Yugrim's shield, the Frun Shield, absorbs any misfortune that comes his way, meaning indicated attacks and damage from his enemy. The same good fortune that the enemy received for attacking Yugrim is now placed on a balance, and further converted into misfortune, which means that anything that happens to Yugrim will come back to bite whoever hurt him. And because all of the damage was absorbed in Yugrim's shield, Yugrim takes no damage at all, while all the attacks are directed at his opponent. He can convert injuries to health, good luck to bad luck, and strong to weak. All that matters is that his balance is maintained. Furthermore, Yugrim shares the power of the Quincy King, as he gains the Almighty Shrift whenever Yuha is asleep. However, the balance is given to Yuha, and Yugrim can only see the future and can't alter it. It's a great representation of the relationship between Yugrim and Yuha, showing a perfect balance between right-hand man and king. Pernida Parkenyas, one of the 4 royal Quincy guards, dons the Shrift of C, the Compulsory. As the left hand of the Soul King, Pernida is extremely strong, and possesses a Shrift capable of defeating even the strongest of opponents. The Compulsory allows Pernida to shoot nerve-like tendons from its fingers, and once they make contact with an object or enemy, they are able to control it at will. Pernida can use this ability to absolutely shred through enemies, as he can simply compress or twist the infected body to a pulp. Even a special war threat like Kenpachi Zaraki was no match for the Compulsory, as his arm was nearly shredded in an instant. His reconstruction is also applicable to himself, as Pernida has unfathomable regeneration and can heal from almost any attack. But his biggest strength is evolution. Pernida can adapt to almost every attack, and if something doesn't kill him straight away, he'll simply adapt to it and become stronger. He's basically a twisted form of Maharaga. Interestingly enough, the Compulsory isn't actually a power granted by Yuha like most other Shrifts. Pernida was actually born with this ability due to his relationship with the Soul King, as he is the left hand, and Yuha just kinda went with it. Askin Naklavar, one of the royal Quincy guards, wields the Shrift D, the Death Dealing. The Death Dealing works by calculating and manipulating the lethal dosage of substances. If Askin consumes a substance, say an enemy's blood, he could calculate the lethal dosage and lower that value in order to incapacitate his opponent. This also applies to Askin himself, as he could raise the lethal dosage for poisons, projectiles, and other forms of damage, allowing him to heal against otherwise fatal attacks. Furthermore, he even develops an immunity to whatever substance or energy-based attack he is attacked with, so he's nearly unkillable. The Death Dealing has multiple attacks dealing with poisons as well. Gift Ball is a slow projectile blend of chemicals and substances that strike Askin's opponent. Gift Barike creates giant domes of poison that opponents cannot escape from. And Gift Ring is a focused slice of poison that instantly kills the region it touches. Overall, the Death Dealing is absolutely monstrous, and it makes sense that Askin was the only Quincy not originally from the Royal Guard that was pulled up during Yuha's assault on the Royal Palace. Bambietta Basterbean, the user of the Shrift E, the Explode, is low-key kinda bad. The Explode is exactly what it sounds like. It grants Bambietta the power to utilize... She accomplishes this by granting her Reishi explosive properties. Essentially, Bambietta's spiritual attacks can turn into bombs when they've made contact with an enemy, adding an element of surprise and unpredictability to her attacks. This gives Bambietta tremendous omnidirectional attack potency, as she could fire a flurry of Reishi bombs that have no target and still cluster bomb the enemy to oblivion. It's what she did to my goat Shinji, and I still hold it against her. However, her attacks can be countered quite easily. Simply destroying or deflecting the Reishi bombs before they've had a chance to detonate is one option. Sajin Komamura utilized this tactic to detonate Bambietta's own bombs, leaving her charred. To be real, Bambietta probably got done the dirtiest out of any Quincy. She got packed up by Komamura, then got betrayed by her own team, and even got turned into a zombie. Justice for Bambi. Shrift F, the fear is wielded by Asnod, who genuinely looks like Nightmare Fuel. The fear manifests itself through mainly Asnod's spiritual attacks, being his spiral thorns. Whenever an enemy makes contact with Asnod's attacks, the fear floods them with a wave of limitless fear, often overwhelming them to the point of shock and death. Essentially, if he hits you, you're forced to imagine your wildest and most darkest fears come to life, and you won't be able to differentiate reality from fiction. Under his Volständig, Tartarforus, Asnod adopts a new form where he looks absolutely horrifying. The conditions to activate the fear are even less. Asnod only needs to be seen by the enemy to trigger his ability. He uses this to his advantage by creating a large dome of eyes to ensure his victims always make eye contact with him. The only way to subjugate the fear is through sheer willpower or by already being dead in the first place or in a deathly state. It's how Rukia was able to bypass the fear and use her Bankai, Haka no Togame, to defeat the demon. What's really interesting about Asnod is that the only fear he had ever had was disappointing Yuha Baha, which is kinda cool because he's literally the master of fear. Shrift G, the Glutton, is used by Lil Toto Lampert, a core member of the Bambi squad. The Glutton allows Lil Toto to expand her mouth to consume anything, whether it be humans or inanimate objects. However, this ability has a major drawback in which it constantly leaves Lil Toto hungry. She's basically Kirby, but there's actually more to her powers besides just eating. In Bleach's light novel, Can't Feel Your Own World, Lil Toto is seen to have survived the 1,000-year blood war alongside Gazelle, where she reveals a secret about her powers. You see, the Glutton not only lets you eat anything, but it also allows you to absorb and manifest the abilities that you've eaten. Essentially, if Lil Toto eats somebody, she could use their powers, which technically means that Lil Toto has two Shrifts, the Glutton and the Love, as she had eaten the previous user of the Love, Pepe Wakabrata, but she explained in the light novel that she refuses to do so out of sheer principle, and refuses to force people to fight for her like Pepe does. She's low-key a Chad, and I wasn't familiar with her game, and out of all the Quincies, she's probably one of the most respectable. Shrift H, the Heat, is utilized by Baz B, who rocks the sickest mohawk between the three realms. The Heat allows Baz B to transmutate nearby Reishi into flames and fire, giving him full flame manipulation powers. His firepower is considerably advanced, as he was able to block Yamamoto's Ryujin Jaka and could melt Hitsugaya's Bankai with ease. His attacks are divided between his 5 fingers, known as the Burner Fingers. Burner Finger 1 allows Baz B to shoot an extremely fast and precise beam of fire at his enemies, melting any obstacle in his way. Burner Finger 2 is created from a swiping motion created by Baz B's 2 fingers, creating 2 massive slices of flames that can incinerate his enemies. Burner Finger 3 allows Baz B to simply melt nearby surfaces into lava. Burner Finger 4 summons a flaming sword that explodes upon impact and melts through enemies. And lastly, Burning Full Fingers generates 5 streams of fire, all from Baz B's fingers, creating a massive laser of fire that spirals into his opponents. Also, he's voiced by Josuke from JoJo's, which makes sense when you look at his hair. Shrift I, the Iron, is wielded by Kangdu, Sangdu, Tungdu. I don't really know how to say his name. The Iron allows Kangdu to basically transform his skin into an unbreakable steel, rendering nearly all physical attacks useless. He can utilize this ability for both offense and defense, as he is both the strongest spear and the sturdiest shield. It's kinda like Daz Bones' ability in One Piece, and even so, he loves to utilize blades. His go-to weapon involves using Reishi manipulation to conjure steel claws like Wolverine to slice his opponents. His main ability is Sheijing Zao, which translates to Snake Strong Claws, where Kangdu creates a jaw-like attack from both of his claws to create a serpentine head, launching 2 blasts of energy at his opponent. However, he's not invulnerable. A concept of damage like the balance can defeat Kangdu as long as it bypasses the Iron's durability, and Hashwalt used this to his advantage to slay the Quincy. Low-key, he's one of the most wasted Quincies in the verse, as his ideology of living together and dying together hits kinda hard. Justice for my boy, he didn't deserve to go out like that. Shrift J, the Jail, is the first Shrift we ever see, being used by Kilgi Obi. The Jail allows Kilgi to bind his Reishi to other objects, creating literal spirit jails that trap his enemies. These jails are insanely durable, as a point-blank, Bankai bolstered Getsuga Tensho from Ichigo Kurosaki had little to no effect on the jail. And to make it even crazier, it has the strength to bind together the openings and closings of literal dimensions. From the amount of screen time Kilgi had, he was definitely a threat. Bro literally took down Kisuke, Chad, Orihime, 3 Fracciones, and 2 of Aizen's subordinates before stalling Ichigo. His feet per screen time ratio is absolutely insane. Bro was playing like 2010 LeBron or 2007 Federer. In fact, he's even the combat instructor for some of the Quincies, even the Sternritter. In fact, Kubo himself stated in a fan site interview that Kilgi's usage of Sclave Rai, the technique Quincies used to gather nearby reishi, was the most powerful and potent among all the Quincies. GG9 and Robert Acutron don't actually have shrifts, or at least they're not named, but there's some great theories as to what the shrifts K and N could possibly be. A popular explanation for BG9 is K, the knowledge, which derives from BG9's ability to analyze information and data to adapt to his enemies, creating wildcards and counters for any possible tricks. For instance, when he defeated Soifone, he was about to probe her to examine her Muken Shunko in order to add this new attack into his corporate. Furthermore, the BG in BG9 could stand for background, so when you combine his shrift with his name, it creates the word background knowledge, which perfectly describes his analytical fighting style. As for Robert Acutron, his shrift is theorized to be N, the nimble, which stems from Robert's unusually fast Hirin-Yaku and his ability to speed blitz his enemies. We saw this from his fight against Shunsui, which allowed him to permanently injure the head captain, and his fight against Byakuya, where his speed was no match for Senbon Zakura. It's probably the best explanation considering that Kubo never gave us the actual name of his shrift, so it's all left to speculation. Shrift L, the love, is wielded by Pepe Wakabrata, who's kinda just gross to look at. The love manifests itself through heart-shaped projectiles that Pepe can fire. Anyone struck by these blasts instantly fall in love with Pepe, no matter if they're an enemy or an ally. Those under Pepe's influence will only follow his orders and even attack their own allies if they're commanded. Plus, he can disguise his curse by making his followers appear as normal before commanding them to strike. The love works on anything with a heart, and therefore Zanpakutos are susceptible as well. When Kuchiki Byakuya tried to deflect Pepe's projectiles with Senbon Zakura, his own blade turned against him. It would be really cool if he could also utilize their Bankais, which would kinda be overpowered. There's actually 2 users of the love, however, and the other user is Lil Toto, the user of the Glutton. Because she ate Pepe at the end of the second invasion, Lil Toto was able to utilize the powers of the love. However, she refuses to do so because the concept is disgusting to her. But yeah, that's honestly valid because nobody likes this guy. Kind of funny how his power is love, but he's not exactly easy on the eyes. Shrift M, the Miracle, is utilized by Gerard Valkyrie and is one of the most busted shrifts in the verse. The Miracle allows Gerard to manifest miracles into reality, essentially manipulating probability to create unforeseeable outcomes. For instance, if Gerard believed it would be a miracle if he won his next battle, the Miracle would manipulate his odds to ensure his victory. Furthermore, he can convert any damage inflicted by his attackers into strength, allowing him to grow in both size and power. This gives him absurd regenerative ability, as Kenpachi's Bankai form sliced him in half and he still survived and grew stronger upon regenerating. Even his sword can reflect attacks, giving Gerard a literal Thorns 3 enchantment. And to make it crazier, he was born with this ability due to his relationship to the Soul King. However, Kubo realized this and made a correction to the Miracle during an interview. If you destroy Gerard's core, which can only be exposed after a massive attack like Kenpachi's Slice, Gerard will effectively die. If you can't get to his core before he regenerates, Gerard will keep growing bigger and bigger and bigger until he's absolutely unstoppable. Shrift O, the Overkill, is used by Driscoll Bursey, who has the first confirmed kill in the Quincy invasion. After skewering 1st Division Lieutenant Chojiro Sasakibe and stealing his Bankai, Driscoll manifests the Overkill by simply eradicating his enemies. The Overkill grants killing-induced strength enhancement. Every time Driscoll kills somebody, whether it be friend, foe, or beast, he grows stronger. Basically, you do not want to be within 10 feet of this guy or you're cooked. The Overkill, however, doesn't apply to resistance. Essentially, Driscoll is somewhat of a glass cannon, as his attack potential can be extremely high, but his defense isn't nearly enough to protect him from lethal attacks like Yamamoto's Ryujin Jaka. And unfortunately, this ability isn't stackable. Kubo stated that every time Driscoll eats, sleeps, or faints, the Overkill resets back to 0, and Driscoll must continue killing his enemies to regain his strength. To be honest, he was kind of a plot character, only being used to fuel Yamamoto's rage. However, the Overkill would have been insanely busted if he had used it correctly. Basically, it's a classic example of an overpowered ability with an unqualified user. Shrift P, the power, is wielded by Meninus Macalin, who might be badder than Bambietta. The power is pretty self-explanatory. It grants Meninus superhuman superhuman strength. She's able to pick up huge debris like it's nothing and beat down her opponents with superior strength, kinda like Jesus Burgess' ability in One Piece. This strength is bolstered even further by her Volstandik, Ponipora, where Meninas activates her dumbbell duster ability to batter her opponents to a pulp. However, she's sort of a one-trick pony. Anyone who can outspeed her or resist her attacks can basically wreck her, and that's the only thing that's going for the power. But it's crazy because she isn't even the most powerful in the Bambi squad, as Kubo even stated Lil Toto outclassed her in both hand-to-hand combat and blood usage. Despite that, she actually survived the 1,000-year blood war, alongside Nanana Najacoup and Candace Catnip, but they were captured by the 12th Division Captain Mayuri Kurotsuchi. To be honest, the power isn't anything crazy, and it would have been cool to see Meninas have some sort of secret power like Lil Toto. Plus, for a Shrift literally called the Power, it wasn't exactly the most powerful against opponents like Ichigo. Today we're doing double action, with Shrift's Q and R, the Question and the Roar. The Question, wielded by Berenice Gabrielli, is kinda weird. The user can simply object and question every single action of their enemies. Essentially, their entire arsenal revolves around making their enemies doubt their every move, which can seriously mess somebody up in the heat of battle. In fact, this can even have extremely detrimental effects, as Berenice could simply question an opponent's entire life, relationships, fighting spirit, weapon, you name it, rendering them useless. However, this ability doesn't work on people who can't hear her or if she can't talk, and if the person simply doesn't care. The Roar, used by Jerome Guizbat, allows him to enlarge his entire body to a monstrous form. The roars he creates are insanely damaging, and he can even explode the heads of lower-level Shinigami. Even Kenpachi himself had trouble hearing after facing the Shrift, but it kinda worked in his favor because it allowed him to nullify the Question's ability. But considering both of them got packed up by Kenpachi in one fell swoop, it's easy to assume that they're fodder, but their Shrifts are pretty interesting regardless. Shrift S, the Superstar, is used by Mask the Masculine, and it's honestly pretty overpowered. The Superstar is triggered through James, Mask's companion, who is nigh immortal. Whenever James begins cheering for Mask, his support is channeled through it, manifesting itself as strength boost and massive regeneration. Essentially, every time James cheers for Mask, he basically receives a buff, which is insane, because Bro was able to defeat 2 captain-level Shinigamis and their Bankai, because not only did he tank repeated explosive punches from Kensei's Tekken Tachikaze, but he also managed to one-shot Rose with a star laser that did him dirtier than Ace. Furthermore, both James and Mask are connected through their souls, kinda like Daki and Gyutaro in Demon Slayer. You can't kill one of them without killing the other in short succession, meaning that focusing on both James and Mask is something you need to prioritize. What's even wilder is the fact that Mask the Masculine isn't actually the true user of the Superstar Shrift. In fact, James is the original wielder, and Mask is just the manifestation of his vision of a true hero. Shrift T, the Thunderbolt, is utilized by Candace Catnip, who might just be the baddest of the Bambis. The Thunderbolt allows Candace to manifest and gain complete control over lightning strikes, letting her generate high-voltage lightning attacks that can incinerate her foes. She can shoot them as arrows, fire them as lasers, and even shock large groups of enemies in one fell swoop. And her lightning is strong enough to char an injured Kenpachi Zaraki, which is actually a decent feat. She can even utilize a lightning jump technique, where she dodges her opponents by transforming her body into lightning, which is straight out of Enel's playbook. Her Volstandik Barbariel enhances Candace's lightning's attack tenfold, and she can even generate lightning blades to engage her close combat potential. However, she's quite inexperienced at controlling her Volstandik, and it's extremely taxing on her body as a result. Plus, she's ranked the weakest at blood control, so she's kind of a glass cannon. After the events of the 1,000-year blood war, we learned that Candace has survived alongside Meninas and Nanana, but they were turned into subjects by the 12th captain Mayuri Kurotsuchi, which is low-key a fate worse than death. Shrift U, the Underbelly, is used by Nanana Najacoup, who low-key has an underrated power. The Underbelly allows Nanana to analyze the Reiatsu composition of his enemies, imagining them to be divided into a grid-like pattern. Nanana can then pinpoint weaknesses and holes in their reishi and attack them, depleting them of their Reiatsu and leaving the enemy paralyzed. This effect grows stronger the longer Nanana locks onto a target, meaning the longer you fight him, the deadlier he gets. And he grants his reishi depletion techniques through his morphine pattern, where Nanana embeds a large U onto his opponent's body. We saw how powerful this technique could be when Nanana managed to incapacitate a Shinigami like Aizen for 5 minutes, who quite literally has the most spiritual pressure in the verse. Despite being backstabbed by Yuha Baha, he still remained loyal to him, and it's why Nanana refused to back down after the Soul King's death, and ended up being donutted by Baz B. Overall, he's not a very interesting guy, but his Shrift does cook. Shrift V, the Visionary, is wielded by Gremi Thimo, who might might just be the most overpowered in the verse. The Visionary grants Gremmy the ability to manifest anything he can imagine. Yes, that means literally anything. He imagines someone's bones to be cookies. He can create firearms, meteors, and pure space out of thin air just because his brain told him to. He can even create clones of himself and mimic life, as he created 2 Quincy soldiers, Gwenelle Lee and Chaz Domino. However, there is no limit to his imagination, which can ultimately backfire on him. If Gremmy imagined himself losing or dying, it would naturally happen. He has to stay focused the entire time in order to not accidentally end himself. Basically, intrusive thoughts are his worst enemy. What's even crazier is that Gremmy's true form isn't actually what we see on screen, but it's just his brain. The persona we see is just a manifestation of what Gremmy's brain believes he'd look like, or the one he chooses to look like instead. Bro had the potential to be one of the elite guard, but Yuha locked him up instead of using his power. Kind of a lost opportunity on the Quincy side, to be honest. Shrift W, the Wind, is utilized by Ninzel Weisel, who's got the Gengar type of freak going on. Ninzel's main ability is to create an aversion field around him. Essentially, it's kind of similar to Gojo's Infinity. He can push aside objects using the space surrounding him, and it's kind of like he has an invisible force field that can warp space. By using the Wind, Ninzel can manipulate his surroundings as he pleases, and his bubble prevents any solid objects like swords or kicks from entering his zone. Furthermore, he can stretch this space offensively, using it to cut people in half by sheer space manipulation, which is kind of overpowered. However, this isn't a passive ability. Ninzel can only activate it when he chooses to, so any attack that outspeeds his perception or sneak attacks can prove fatal. This includes internal attacks as well, as the space Ninzel can warp is limited to just the outside of his body. He literally only had one purpose in the manga, and it was to show off how powerful Squad Zero could be, as he essentially got no-diffed by Senju Maru. Honestly though, he's got a pretty cool ability, so it sucks that he went out that dirty. Shrift X, the X-axis, is wielded by Lil Barrow, who's one of Yuha Baha's Royal Guard members. The X-axis was actually the first Shrift ever created, so it makes sense that it's absolutely overpowered. Essentially, the X-axis allows Lil Barrow to shoot through anything on a horizontal plane, kinda like the X-axis in math. However, instead of a bullet or a projectile, it simply deletes anything on that plane, making it impossible to deflect or block. Furthermore, it only applies to Barrow's targets, so he can pick out enemies using his shots without harming his allies. His ability also has evolution stages, as after opening both his eyes, he grants the ability of the X-axis on his own body. Like his matter erasure abilities, Lil Barrow can simply pass through any attack, similar to Obito's Sharingan ability from Naruto. What's even crazier is that his final form is near immortal, and he can erase large city blocks using giant beams of light, making him unstoppable against most enemies. Unfortunately, it didn't really do too much for him, as Shinken Hakyoken's deflective properties completely countered his Trumpet of Light, stripping him of his invulnerability. Shrift Y, the Yourself, actually has 2 users, Lloyd and Lloyd. Kubo was definitely tweaking when he was making these guys. Despite having similar abilities, the 2 brothers have different versions of the Y Shrift. Lloyd, who faced Kenpachi Zaraki, has the ability to transform and mimic an individual's appearance, but he also has the ability to completely mimic a person's powers and abilities. So the only way he was able to be defeated by Kenpachi was simply that Kenny had that dog in him and became stronger than himself. Meanwhile, Lloyd's version of the Yourself also allows him to copy appearances, but unlike Lloyd, he gains the memories and personality of the person he's copying, which is why when he was impersonating Yuha Baha, he was able to recognize his old Royal Guard members despite never knowing them. So basically, both of them are kinda overpowered, especially Lloyd, because if Lloyd could copy a person's abilities with 100% accuracy, I'm sure he solos about 90% of the verse. Luckily, Kenpachi was already subconsciously holding himself back, so the level of which Lloyd copied was not nearly the full capacity of Kenpachi's true strength. Shrift Z, the Zombie, is the last one in the installation, being wielded by Gazelle Gewell. And before any of you say it, no, I am not hearing you out. The Zombie Shrift allows Gazelle to control anyone with her blood. Essentially, if even a drop of blood touches you, you have to become her personal zombie, where you must follow her orders even if it involves hurting yourself or your allies. Interestingly enough, her technique doesn't work on quincies unless they're dead, meaning that she can't control her allies unless they've died, but she can control her enemies even if they're alive. She can even use the zombie to heal herself and others others by using her zombified corpses as fresh healing samples. However, the zombie isn't an end-all be-all. Pepe's the love shrift and Mayuri's treatment can both override the zombification, and according to Kubo, she's the second strongest of all the Bambis, which makes sense considering she's both skilled at hand-to-hand combat and blood control. Still though, we can never forgive her for what she did to Bambi, and seeing her get packed up was honestly pretty satisfying. And that concludes the Quincy series, and you can check them all out on our YouTube. I'll post more Bleach in the future, and if you have any ideas in the comments, let us know.